put something new in, try to put in a new habit, maybe just unrelated, or just like we're changing on the outside here, change your environment, change your association. And sometimes it doesn't always work. If you're here today, it's probably because life can sometimes feel like a rut, a routine, same problems, same actions, same mindset, same results. But what if I told you there's a way to break out of that rut, the rut that you're in? And more importantly, that the answer to that has been hiding in this game about endless loops the whole time. If you notice the title, it took me 30 years to learn the life lessons in this game. That's an absolute truth right there. And you'll find out that this game has a lot hiding in these loops. Getting back into it right here. We got a little base camp. Got some upgrades here. I think even from the very beginning, you could even look at your upgrades and your base camp as a way to view your current mindset. Kind of like your build out through each loop over and over again. The things that'll help you kind of move on and continue forward. Let's go ahead and get set up for our first go around. So as we're going through this loop, very easy, very simple at first. Just got a couple little small things. Let's go ahead and start adding in. So imagine this. Imagine if I hadn't changed any of that stuff there. I didn't add anything new to my daily routine. Just kept doing the same thing over and over again. I think you'll find that that's kind of how you begin to get stuck in your own rut routine. Is either choose not to, maybe you just don't have the options at the time. When you first start, you don't have any of these cards, don't have any options. But now I do. So as you start to pick up some more options, you can start playing them out. So you start adding a little bit more and more. But if I hadn't, just imagine if I hadn't, I'd just be fighting slimes the whole time. Now I don't know what that would look like, but I imagine it'd be pretty boring. And also, if I had some sort of expectation to change life or results, what's the chance of that happening if I keep repeating the same thing over and over and over again? The crazy thing too is, just like in life, it's kind of your choice to begin with. You choose whether or not to change your path. And when that happens, sometimes you just feel like your progress is not going anywhere. You get apathetic. And now guess what? You started your own mental loop. And that mental loop is, man, got nothing going on. And it's life's kind of eh. Just feeling kind of eh with life right now. And then, once you have that, then you start to feel like, what's the point? So then you don't change anything. Then you get discouraged because nothing's changing. And since you're not changing anything, you get discouraged. And congratulations, you've now built yourself the rut of apathy. And it doesn't have to be that way. You can just start making some small changes. And now with small changes, there's a couple things to think about. And one of those being, small changes compound. I'll give you a great example right here. So I put these two little battlefields together and that created its own little separate tile. And that own separate tile now has these two things compounding on it. So I've compounded a lot of obstacles here. You might be asking like, oh, why would I do that? Well, when you compound those obstacles, life can add some challenges, but also some great rewards like this little treasure chest. Or like over here, I have a building. It's compounding these effects and then also compounded this effect right here. And so we keep moving on through the loop. And then here's another example. You got these mountains. What happens when you start stacking up enough of some sort of habit or change? Let's say these mountains represent, reading a book 10 minutes a day, 10 minutes of exercise a day, something small. Over time, you stack them up, and voila, it grows into a mountain. There's things like these that when I see this game, it's like there's so much that can be taught in this game about loops. And I think too with loop heroes, you start changing you know, the world, at least the loop, one little bit at a time, one tile at a time. And just like that's how it works in life. You just change one little thing at a time. Soon you start growing a little bit. You start getting some better stuff. You start equipping yourself to handle what life has to offer more and more, and make sure that you are good to go. So if you ever read the book Compound Effect, it talks a lot about how the small things do add up. It's kind of like if you read 1 page a day, in a year that's 365 pages, that's a book. Imagine if you read 1 book a month. That's 12 books in a year, and that's probably, at least in my life, that's way more books than I like ever read. Ever. And you know, right now I'm reading probably about, 36 books a year, which sounds like a lot, but that just came from 3 books a month, which sounds like a lot, but that just came from 15 minutes a day. And over time, the reading habit, as it stacked up, it got quicker. I got better at it, got more efficient. So let's talk about some momentum too. Right now, in this game, got some pretty decent momentum going on. I started kind of moving and grooving. Things are getting just a little bit easier, and that's because of momentum. So the beautiful thing, and also kind of the tragic thing of momentum, even with this game too, is good and bad. Because sometimes you can have good momentum. You started your positive habit, and you kept it going, and you got it going through loop over loop over loop. Adds up, things get easier. You get stronger, you get faster, you get more durable, more stamina, I guess you could say. But then you also start to, it just becomes natural. You just kind of get it. You get the it factor, I guess you could say. And that just comes from having all of that repeated habit continue to put you up more and more and more. And so you can look at it too is, you got a loop which goes in a circle, right? And so what happens when something is going up and it's from a circle? We actually find out that when you turn it on its side, that circle actually isn't a circle, but instead it's an upward spiral. And the beautiful thing about that is, it's that momentum of the habit bringing you up and up and up and up, which is a good thing. It's the importance of having those good habits, adding on the good. Because if you just add on the bad, like if there's only bad things that came from the tiles I placed down, then instead of an upward spiral, your loop now starts to sink downwards more and more and more and more. And you can even relate it too to like people who, let's say, smoke a lot of cigarettes. If you think about it this way, people don't, and to my understanding, people don't necessarily wake up one day and say, hey, I'm gonna smoke 2 packs of cigarettes. It kind of seems like it ends up being a, hey, I started with smoking 1 cigarette, and then that turned into 2 cigarettes, and that turned into a pack of cigarettes, and so on and so forth. So that small one-time decision turned into another one, turned into a downward spiral, and the person's like, hey, now I can't seem to get out of this rut, this downward spiral. That's why I like the concept of ruts and spirals, because it, especially on the downward side of things, it just keeps going down to hit a point. You say, hey, I gotta start reversing this. I gotta turn it the other way around. Otherwise, you end up in a rut, which is basically a grave with 2 open sides you get to walk through. So that's why it's important to start noticing when you're going down in that spiral, you try to fix it as much as you can. And so you might say, well, Matt, how, it's not easy to fix stuff like that. Hey, I totally agree. There's a lot to it. You can't just say abracadabra, magic wand, like it's fixed. What we can start doing is you can start changing some things. Whether it's identifying that one bad habit and then working to just slightly change it, do a little less of it, try to replace it with something else. The other thing too is you can imagine, like, just like we're setting up these tiles, you know, put something new in, try to put in a new habit, maybe just unrelated, or just like we're changing on the outside here, change your environment, change your association. And you know, sometimes it doesn't always work at the beginning, but just like in this game, I still got something out of that last loop. And now I can come back here and say, okay, how do we make this a little bit better? Well, you know what? Let's look and see what we can do to get this upgraded. We have identified that we made it to a bad spot. So guess what? Let's make a small change. And let's start again. And so that kind of brings you to, sometimes you gotta use these loops for learning. You know, sometimes you just gotta say, hey, all right, I'm kind of here. You know, that's when the loop is kind of more of a season than it is anything else. And it's a season that you're in for a specific reason. I find that most of the times, in my case, maybe it only happens every once in a while for you, but maybe you're in your rut or routine for a reason. Now, whether that's a reason of like, hey, you know, should be doing something I need to change, but after you enough pain, or you're just saying, hey, enough is enough, then you make your change. So for example, we lost the last one, and we said, hey, enough's enough, so we changed. And we learned something. You know, since it's been a while since I played this game, I kind of learned, okay, don't stack certain things up together. You know, make sure you give space for you to be kind of in a position to like heal and recover. And to also, you know, make sure you equip yourself pretty well. So that way you're ready for the next challenge. So sometimes you may also need to learn to have a little bit of grace with yourself too. Because, you know, maybe your routine has been a little tough on you. And I can feel you sometimes. You know, I've been in spots where it has been really hard. You know, sometimes it's less of like a series of small changes had caused whatever issue I had. Maybe it was a major life event. Maybe it was something that was kind of an unavoidable thing. I think when it comes to that, it's understanding, okay, it's also a season to have some grace with myself. And because you have a little bit of grace with yourself, you don't necessarily continue to put yourself down even further. That can happen too. You can be the person putting you in the rut. So if you are in a tough spot, you know, have a little grace on yourself. Know that you'll get through it. You just got to make those small changes. You know, one step at a time. One fight, one day at a time. So when it comes down to breaking some of these ruts, some of these life lessons that I found in this game, not just how the game works and its gameplay and kind of identifying some of this, is what really got me thinking was, yeah, it is about making some small changes, maybe even making some planned small changes, because when you have some planned small changes, that can help guide your life better. Because if you're not intentional with the changes, trust me, something will make the changes for you. The other part of it too was understanding, hey, you can choose the direction of your spiral. You know, you can put yourself in a position to stop a downward spiral and then choose to start spiraling upwards. The other thing too, which was really big, was changing input. You know, input would be like literally changing what you're putting out there in the field. You know, making sure that I have the right kind of support. You know, I want to make sure I have the right kind of support out there. And that right kind of support can be who I'm hanging out with, the places I'm going, what I'm listening to, what I'm reading. You know, definitely the who you're associating with is a big thing. And then I think for me and where I'm at in my life currently, is, yeah, sometimes you're in a tough season or a tough rut because there's just something in there that you need to learn that you're either choosing not to learn, or it just hasn't sunk in yet. And there's been times where there's been a little bit of stubbornness in learning things, and so having the grace to be in these ruts have been super helpful. And then also just being able to understand that the rut might be there for a season of training, a season of getting me in position for some great things in my life to happen next. That's where I found that there's been a lot there to this. So those are some of the lessons that I had learned in this fun game about loops. Hopefully there's a lesson in there for you. I definitely would love to hear if there is a habit or routine that's helped you out, that's helped you grow, or if you have recently come out of your own rut. Go ahead, put those in the comments if you like seeing this kind of stuff. I would definitely love to continue on with these things. So if you like loophero, if you like this kind of content specifically, let me know. If you have a topic you want to hear discussed in later on, definitely will love any feedback on that as well. And with that being said, if you're looping in life, make sure it's an upward spiral. So go out there, be impactful, be loving, be kind, and I'll see you being in a good spot to move yourself up. See you next time.